Interphase Video presents Fairfield Today. Brought to you by Fairfield Federal Savings and Loan, Fairfield Medical Center, Fairhope Hospice and Palliative Care, the Fairfield County Board of Developmental Disabilities, Dagger Law, and the Frank E. Smith Funeral Home.
Hi, and welcome to Fairfield Today. My name is Rick Schneider, community educator with Fairhope Hospice and Palliative Care, and we're home in the Pickering House. We are in the Pickering House right now, and our normal co-host Denise Bauer is not able to make it today, so I'm going to wing the show, and it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. Joining me is an old war buddy of mine. I won't say which war, but Tracey Miller. Tracey, good to see you.
Well, thank you, Rick. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, and when I talk about old war buddy, you started out with Fairhope quite a while ago.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, so you are taking me back to 2007.
Wow. They had color TV and they're in computers?
Yeah. And I think that was the year the Pickering House opened, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it was. We actually accepted our first patient May 1st. So.
And I would have walked through these doors in September of 2007.
Oh, okay. So you've come a long way, baby. That's an old commercial for it. But yeah, you began as a volunteer.
Yes. First was introduced to hospice through the hands of my loved ones. If anybody hears my story, I always say that rooms 1 and 10 are my rooms where my loved ones were. And then I became a volunteer, and you were a part of the beginning of the journey for that. And the volunteering turned out to be a life-altering experience. I have a background in education. I have a background in communication. And so it's very important for me to make sure that people deliver their messages. So I used to help people write letters to their loved ones.
Yeah, and the whole thing evolved with your background. I remember you telling me one time that in the school system, sometimes children start having behavioral problems, or their grades would start going down, or something going on, and sometimes we didn't realize that maybe a grandmother died a while ago, or even a pet. And children don't have a way of describing or expressing their feelings. And with your learning Fairhope Hospice, tying in with your education, it was a marriage made in history or made in church or someplace.
It's definitely been a learning curve.
Yeah.
I think it's been a learning curve for me, for the agency, also for the community at large. I'm very pleased with the response of our community. Because I come from a school background, I spend a lot of time in the schools. One of my goals when I first was asked to become part of the staff here was to make sure that we took care of the grieving kids in our community. And I think a lot of times we want to help our children, but we don't want to cause them pain. But what we found out is that to help them with grief, we actually have to give them a mechanism, an avenue to share their pain, to let that out in a healthy fashion. And so we're pleased to have our partnerships with the area schools and to provide that support.
And that's something that really didn't exist to a degree. We did have a children's grief counselor, I think, for a while, but she didn't have the background that you did coming from the educational system. And it has really been a godsend. And in fact, you were an example of Fairhope has had many volunteers become paid employees. And we've had several therapies and programs developed from volunteers. Yours is an exceptionally successful one.
And Rick, I think if you would look in the mirror, you might just have to say that that's also your case, is it not?
Well, somewhat. I was sort of a volunteer, became sort of a paid employee.
Yeah, I think, and that's the one thing that connects both of us. We're both storytellers.
Well, we are, and we also are immersed in hospice, Fairhope. I love being here, so do you. And, starting out as volunteers, we did it for free.
Right.
And you really have developed your program from almost non-existing. It was somewhat children's counseling in school or something, but now we accept every child who is having, that the school system has learned has experienced a death or a loss.
Yes, and so we are helping children whose loved ones died by a variety of causes, not just hospice. And the other part, with donations from the community embracing the program, Fairhope, our board, our leadership team believing in the community, in the program, in the community, we're able to offer this free of charge.
That's amazing. Fairhope doesn't charge, and people always want to know what's the catch. Well, you brought up a good point. We have helped so many people, and they want to say thank you. And sometimes the best way to do it is helping us financially, which Medicare does reimburse. People ask quite a lot, how can you do this for free? What's the catch? Well, we do get reimbursed from Medicare for certain functions, the basic hospice care.
For our patient care, our grief support is not a billable reimbursable program because all of our reimbursement is driven towards the patient. Unfortunately, when our patient dies, we are not, able to do any further billing. But we know in hospice that we want to support those who are grieving, and so we do that through our grief program. So we have two branches. We have our hospice-based branch and our community-based branch.
Yep, they are separate because one is billable and one isn't. And I guess really the core problem with the government or insurance companies is that grief is invisible. I can say, well, I'm really grieving, I need a few bucks here. There's no way to prove it.
And the beauty of Fairhope's program, our grief support program, is because we don't have to charge for the program, we eliminate all those questions. We make it, I always say it's as easy as a phone call as difficult as a phone call. We're not tied to specific limitations on can you afford to have the support. We're not tied to when did the death occur, because we know that we often re-grieve a loss when we have new experiences. In the case of children, as they get older and learn more about the world, they also learn the impact of that loss.
That's interesting.
So we make it as user-friendly as we can.
That's one of those little hidden advantages of not charging. We don't worry about them coming in too much or too little. It's just as needed. And, we don't have to worry about calling an insurance company. They'll want to know how long is this going to take, how many sessions for how long. It's just how can we help people, period.
Yeah.
And on the regular hospice end of it, it's the same way. We don't worry about a pay source, so we just worry about giving them care. And it's a wonderful place to be in a bad situation, we'll put it that way.
Exactly. Well said.
So, and you mentioned that they can be counseled, join for any reason of a death, or I guess any reason of a loss.
And so what we like to focus our time and our manpower is helping those who have experienced the loss of a loved one, the death of a loved one. So we always want to connect to the death to make sure that we're staying in a certain focus of support, and also to make sure that we are able to address that particular need and use our staff in an efficient manner in that area. We know that there is grief related to other situations. We often are asked to help with those whose family relationships have changed or incarceration. That is outside the scope of Fairhope's practice. We will always connect back to the physical death of a loved one.
Well, I hear the statement, we'll see what we can do. No matter what phone call we get, we'll see what we can do. And in this situation, we'll see if we can help them get into the right direction. We don't say it's not our problem.
Yeah, so, and if we get a call that there is a grief issue, but it is not connected to a loved one's death, then we will use our community partners to say, please call this agency, and they may be better equipped to handle that. And I think that's what anybody who helps with healthcare, anything to support people, is you need to know what is your area that your strength is, and then where you need to allow somebody else to go to someone else's area of strength. So we always want to make sure that we're connected back to a loved one's death.
I think that's another one of those subliminal situations about not being reimbursed. We're not going to lose income or anything else from not being paid to counsel. It's just where can we go to help them?
Right.
When we're talking about stuff, I was just thinking, when I was 8, just turned 9, or actually, well, right in that stretch, we moved from where I grew up in Cincinnati to Fairborn. And I can remember when I was going to school sometimes, I was too old to cry, but I was like 10, I guess it was 9, being in the hall crying, I didn't know why. But my whole life I was picked up from a vibrant neighborhood in a big city and moved to the edge of Fairborn, which was growing, and we were almost like out in a prairie.
Well, and you connect back to one of the key pieces that we do in our grief program is we know that people often search for a purpose and a new identity after they've experienced the death of, let's say, a spouse, a sibling, a parent, any of those grandparent significant relationships. And people need to know, who am I today without the person physically here to help me? And that's one of the pieces that we will just help guide and support people. The entire team that I work with, Amy, Ernie, and now we have Naomi helping us, we don't look at grief as a problem to be fixed. We look at grief as a problem to be supported. So that's where you will hear me say the word support, and I'll say that over and over.
Well, that's a good point, because you should be over it, and how long is it going to take, especially men.
Did you just say over it?
I've heard it.
Did smoke come out of my ears when you just said that? You're going to get me on that soapbox. Grief is not something that we need to get over. We learn to live with that person's loss. You happen to be talking to someone who, I believe that a relationship doesn't end upon death, it changes. And so if I look at the lesson of my grandparents, I think those lessons stay stronger today than maybe I understood at the time they were alive. Certainly in the case of my mother, I learned some of her lessons much better now. I give myself the space to listen to that. So we like to use the idea of continuing bonds. We are always connected to our loved one. And so, like I said, the smoke comes out of my ears when I hear the words closure, get over it. Let's learn how to move with it. I think grief needs to feel more familiar to people than strange.
You know, when we talk about that, I know we're going to go to a break here in a minute, but I was at the art walk several years ago, and I saw a friend of ours. We knew the family from school. Our kids and their kids went to school. Her daughter was my daughter's best friend, and she was killed in a car accident senior year. And they came up, we're talking for a few minutes, and said, you know, I sure miss Heather. And she goes, thank you. Nobody talks about Heather like she didn't exist, or like I forgot about her. Oh, crap, my oldest daughter was killed. Now you tell me, you know. And I thought, well, it's something I've learned from you, to bring them up. They existed, they had purpose, they affected people. And she brought up an interesting point. This was in July, you know, she said Heather was alive for 17 years, 4 months, and 3 days. And she had just passed that being dead for 17 years, 5 months, and 3 days. I go, holy cow. So you never know. In fact, I just got a note from my wife. Our first child wasn't stillborn, but she miscarried very early. And she said he would have been 20 or 47 today. I go, okay. They didn't get over it, obviously.
You saying that phrase again, Rick? that connection is still ever present.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we talk about it out loud. Sometimes we talk about it silently in our heart.
Absolutely. Well,
and both are right.
Yep. We're going to take a short break. Tracey Miller, PAL's director, refer to you as that. Thank you for joining me, and we will be right back.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Fairfield Federal. When it comes to our customers and our community, we go above and beyond to help. Our people make the difference.
We were retiring from Tucson, Arizona, and we made a retirement trip out around Ohio, having decided that's where we wanted to be. And we came across this town called Lancaster, and we fell in love with the downtown area where the fountain is and the memorials and the flags and all this stuff. And I looked around and I said, there's our bank right there.
There's something to be said about a community bank in your hometown.
Right. If you live in the community, you should do business in the community as much as possible. So it makes sense to bank with the community bank where you live.
Fairfield Federal is the bank to be at. If you live in this town, or any town actually, you want to bank at a local home bank. And the employees are happy here, they're conversant, customer service is through the roof. There's nothing more you could ask for.
Personal or business banking, whatever you need, we take it seriously because we know you do. Stop by today at any of our 3 locations and see why the difference is clear. Fairfield Federal Savings and Loan specializes in banking that revolves around you.
Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Dagger Law has been part of the Lancaster community for more than 110 years. This is where we live and work. You'll see us at festivals, sporting events, and all around town. We consider our clients as friends, and we walk alongside you through challenging times. Whether you're a growing business, a changing family, facing litigation, planning your future, or dealing with land issues, we're right here. We are local. We are trusted. We are experienced. Dagger Law.
The moment that you're told that you have cancer, so many things were going through my mind.
I had this pain that kind of doubled over, and FMC got me the help that I needed, so I ended up surviving.
Fairfield Medical Center has helped me get through what was the hardest 6 months of my life.
When I first came to Fairfield Medical Center, she was probably having an allergic reaction. They saved her life, and that's why she's here today.
Hi, and welcome back. My name is Rick Snyder, community educator with Fairhope Hospice and Palliative Care. We are the home of the Pickering House, and we're recording in the Gorsuch room of the Pickering House as we speak. Joining me still, I tried, commercial break. I said, hold on, Tracey, we got more to do.
All right,
Tracey,
Rick.
Yep, Tracey Miller, you are, what is your exact title?
My exact title, Grief Support Manager.
Okay, and you kind of focus on the children's end of it.
So I wear a couple different hats. I help coordinate all of our grief support efforts among the team, be the liaison talking to all of our different staff members in the department. And then I also spend a good bit of my time working with children and their families.
So if we want to know about grief, we could talk to Ernie Doling if we wanted, but you would be the one we will get the real stuff, what's going on, right?
I think between the two of us, you would get a comprehensive answer, all right?
Good political answer.
We tag team well.
You do.
And we each have our strengths, we each have our weaknesses, and the two of us, collectively, we help the best that we can to support families.
Absolutely. We get a lot of compliments, and, we're coming up to a season, we're in the season, I'm not coming up to it, but in the season where you're supposed to forget it for a little while and be happy, grief, where you're supposed to maybe get over it for a while and think of happy thoughts.
You're going to keep saying that phrase.
How am I doing?
Over it, all right. So, grief.
I hear that a lot.
I know. See, that's where I'm getting, teacher side of me's coming out, counting that one. Grief in the holidays, always an interesting challenge. Because we go into the holidays with a certain expectation of what they should look like. And then our loved one has died. And if that was the person who was the matriarch that kept everybody together and that person's not there, sometimes people don't know their roles anymore for the holidays. Sometimes, people always believe that the first holiday is the hardest, but the truth is it's actually the second.
That's a good point. My own experience, my dad died in April, and Thanksgiving we thought was all set until we started setting the table. Well, okay, who's going to sit in Dad's chair, and what are we going to do? And then, the next year, in fact, we set the table and just let his seat empty. The next year, okay, now what are we going to do? We should be over.
Yeah, and I'm glad you put the should be with it. So we always encourage people to try to discuss how you want that holiday to look like. What parts do you want to keep the same? What parts do you want to change? What do you need to do to personally connect you to the holiday? Now, everything I just told you, guess what? It does not work for this year.
Yeah.
Because we have this
curveball,
this COVID curveball. And so we're now challenged with, we want to keep our loved ones safe. We're encouraged to socially distance. We're encouraged not to have our large gatherings. But then we've experienced the death of a loved one, and we know that we want to be around each other, but we don't want to cause each other to get sick, and it just kind of keeps rolling and rolling. And so I think the best that families can do is to, again, have that conversation. That would be the same. How do we want to celebrate the holidays this year? There's a lot of ways that you can do that. Technology can be your friend.
Yeah.
And in Zoom is even allowing people to have a little extra time on free minutes on their platform for the holidays. And so you can use video conferencing, you can use, FaceTime ways to stay connected. You can also, some people are doing cooking where every family's kind of doing the same recipe, but they're doing it collectively and watching each other do it.
That's interesting.
There's, different ways that you can still accomplish being connected. But the biggest piece is to have the discussion, because where I find it falls apart for people is if you go in and you have an expectation. So I'm going to go back to you personally, because I know olives are important to you for your holiday.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes.
And so for those who don't know, Rick always connects Christmas with olives. And if he doesn't have olives, then the holiday feels off for him.
And the reason is, when I was a mini kid, I never liked them, and a friend of mine had olives with the white meat and the turkey. And for me, it was a marriage made in heaven. It's like chocolate syrup on ice cream.
So if you come to your holiday and you have not let anybody know that you expect that there should be olives there?
I did, but then I've learned, some people think it's funny, let's eat all the olives so Rick doesn't get any, ha ha ha.
But see, olives are still part of the discussion.
Yeah.
But if you didn't let people know that, you come into the holiday and all of a sudden you don't have any olives.
And then I would be sad.
Uh-huh.
And they wouldn't know why, really.
Right, because you're not letting anybody know.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's a particular gravy boat that I had when I was a child. It has sat on my table every holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And the kicker is I don't like gravy. But we make sure the gravy boat is there. That one, last year was the first year without, a loved one. It was hard to bring out the gravy boat.
Mm-hmm.
And then midway through the meal, I'm like, something's off. And I run in and get the gravy boat because I realized it needed to be there.
It's like a continuity.
And so I think what families need to do this year is figure out what element do they need to keep the same. Whether you're dealing with COVID challenges, whether you're dealing with the death of a loved one, or both. Figure out what do we need to help feel the holidays and what can we let go of for this year. The other key piece is this year is this year. It's not a predictor for next year.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so if, this is your first year after a loved one died and you can't do whatever the favorite task was, don't think you can't revisit that next year. Next year could look very different. You just may set it aside. I like people to think of setting aside instead of saying it's no longer happening.
That's a good point, because maybe eventually you can start accepting things or adding things back to it, you know. So, yeah, when you mention the importance, I always keep olives in the car just in case.
Yeah, and
but it holds a tie-in with the past to a degree, like your gravy.
Yeah, and it takes you back to a time when life seemed easier, less complicated. Oftentimes they'll connect you back to childhood. When you had that magic of the holidays, but again this year, being a medical care company, we want everybody to be safe. We want everybody to practice. You and I are keeping distance here, from each other.
6 feet from the camera.
Yeah, and so we're, watching out to make sure that we're caring for each other. But have those discussions of how do we want this holiday to look. If there is the particular fudge that was always made, well, you can have somebody make it. You can drop it off a family member's doorsteps, and then they can have it. You can all eat it at the same time, and communicate however you need to at that point.
That's a good point. There are, and some people do think it might be silly to like something a gravy bowl or olives. That seems awful incidental, but the emotional part of it tying in. So if you do have a routine or a tradition that maybe the person who had passed always did.
Right, you need to continue. One of my favorite stories was I worked with a young man whose mother died on our hospice service, and he was struggling with putting up the Christmas tree, but he still wanted to honor his mother. And he remembered that she had one ornament that she really loved. So he found that ornament, bought a single ornament stand, and that became his Christmas decoration for the year.
Wow.
So he was able to have the ornament, he was able to have mom, but he didn't have to have all of Christmas. The next year, he felt more in place to put up the tree. So he didn't put all the ornaments, but he also made sure that mom's ornament was there.
Well, when you talk about the importance of the little things, this is a very long story boiled down. I was in Houston, Texas, with my brother. I worked at a company. My family moved back to Ohio for Thanksgiving. I was supposed to go to his fiancee's house with him for Thanksgiving dinner. Long story short, on Thanksgiving morning, he said he called, he said, well, they don't know you then, they just didn't want you there. They felt uncomfortable having somebody go, okay, so I wasn't going to their Thanksgiving. I went to the parade in downtown Houston. It was incredible. And it was over, and I figured, I'm going to show how cool I am. I'm going to go to like a mission and eat with everybody else, because all I had was $1.04 in my pocket. They were out of food. So I went to another one, and they were closed, and I was starting to get hungry. And so I figured I'd go back to my brother's house. He had locked the door. I didn't have a key. So I went to the warehouse office where I worked, and we had a lot of 55-gallon drums. I'm sitting in the break room, boom, I can hear them boom, hearing these drums go off. I went to our refrigerator, and there was one piece of bologna in a wrapper, kind of curved up. I went to the Stop and Rob, a little carry-out, and for 89 cents I bought a little jar of olives, and I sat in the break room eating my olives, and the meatloaf, not meatloaf, but the bologna had this little slick on it. We won't go into details. I had my olives, and that was my little Thanksgiving dinner, and that has always been one of the most memorable Thanksgivings I ever had.
And that's when I first learned about, the olives.
Yeah.
And for me, it was the gravy boat. And so this year, if you're going to ask me, Tracey, is the gravy boat going to be on your table? Yes. You ask me what's going to be inside it, it's going to be applesauce. Because I don't do gravy.
Yeah. But I'm not going to have bologna. So.
Yeah. And, again, give yourself permission to change up the holidays for this year. Give yourself permission to understand this year is just this year. We have never done COVID and holidays. You've never had to do COVID holidays in the loss of a loved one. And try to do what you can. Also give permission for different family members to want to celebrate and not want to celebrate. One of my other favorite stories is if you have children at the holidays and you as an adult are feeling very sad, follow the lead of your kids. Your kids will get you through the holidays. I once worked with a family, and they did not want to put up Christmas lights. And they usually have multicolored flashing lights, and it was too painful to put them up for the holiday. But one of the children in the family said, we have to have the lights. So they compromised and put up white lights. They didn't flash, they weren't multicolored, but they still had lights. And the child said, I need some element of Christmas. That helped the family get through the holiday. The children will definitely lead you where you need to go.
And they are honest, and that's one of the things I learned from our kids. When we were raising them, even 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever they mumbled, that was evidently important to them. Whatever they said, and you really do have to respond to that. Especially in these situations. They know what's going on. But yeah, you're right. This is a unique situation, and if it's any consolation, which I don't think it is, we're all in the same boat. And everybody's trying to adapt to what's going on, even the line in grocery stores. Just kind of go with it. It's like you said, it's not our new way of living, it's just a bump in the road. So I guess I don't know if there's any profound words of wisdom as we're getting ready to end the show. I know the COVID will end. Grief, we will adapt.
Thank you. All right. I think we go back to what we here at Fairhope believe, and that's celebrating life. Celebrating life however you can, be connected to your loved ones, celebrating the life of the loved one who is not with us this year.
And that's a good point. Real quick, I don't know how many weddings we've had in August, or when it was scheduled for in the spring, how many Thanksgiving dinners, how many Christmases we've had when it was appropriate. It is nice to do something on the 25th or the 4th Thursday, but if it's not possible, do it on Sunday. Do it in the summer.
Keep yourself safe.
Yeah. Well, Tracey, it's always been a great show having you on. I always learn a lot, and you keep the conversation going. We've been through a lot, and I think we're going to have to get together again one of these times.
All right, Rick. We've had a few years together.
Why, I can remember.
I remember when, yeah.
Yep. Well, it looks like our time's up. Thank you for watching, and I've learned a lot. Have a happy holidays, and remember, celebrate life.
Interphase Video presents Fairfield Today. Brought to you by Fairfield Federal Savings and Loan, Fairfield Medical Center, Fairhope Hospice and Palliative Care, the Fairfield County Board of Developmental Disabilities, Dagger Law, and the Frank E. Smith Funeral Home.